Facebook Live on minority department institutions. I'm so honored to finally be the author of these papers.
Hi all, welcome back to my channel. This is your first time visiting, welcome. Today is a special vlog. I am actually taking you to work with me. Not work in the sense of actual work, but some of the aspect of the work I do. As many of you know, I do YouTube as a not pastime, but an activity aside from work, as most YouTubers are. But anyway, I thought today it would be fun to take you to one of those typical days that I would have as an economist. A lot of it has to do with being in front of my computer and doing a lot of research. So it's a very solo type of exercise. But the bulk of the work is really also doing a lot of research, publishing, writing papers. So in the course of that, you become expert in certain topic, and so happened that I have developed some expertise in banking from the different writings I've done, specifically minority depository institutions, whether it be Asian, Black-owned banks. In light of this expertise, I was invited to be in a panel discussion, and I thought it would be fun actually to just take you to see what's up with some of the things I do. Obviously, the panel discussion involved a lot of other people. It's an hour and a half discussion and questions from the audience. It's going to focus on me, but that is not to say that I am the only one responding to those questions. But more than that, the video will be very, very long. So I'll try to highlight some of my comments, obviously, for those viewers who are interested. If not, then you can always sort of fast forward to see what's going on. But the point of today's vlog is to show you a typical day where in the morning I got up, prepared for my presentation, looked into my research, other references, took some notes in anticipation of some of the questions that are going to be asked. And then the meeting is with an annual association, finance association. So it's being held at an hotel downtown. So I'll be going to the hotel, and later I am going to also be attending a couple of sessions, and then I would also be at the presidential address, and then later the president of the association and other colleagues are going to, and I are going to go to dinner. So that's a very long day for me. Here we are, heading to the meeting. I'll try to give you a glimpse of my day today. Maybe you can call it a day in the life of an economist. And for this professional event, my scent of the day is arpège, l'envin, just perfect. For that event, there you go. It's my outfit of the day.
North Columbus Drive.
Yes, I am. where my panel is in Pacific One. The nicest bathroom I've seen. Heading to be part of a panel discussion on banking. I'm pretty early, so I'll be working a little bit more on my notes. So there goes the room where I have my panel discussion.
So I really enjoy writing this paper and thinking about the history of Black banking and what happened to it over time and how it has impacted customers. So Black and Latino people make up 32% of the U.S. population, but represent 64% of the country's unbanked and 47% of its underbanked households. So while this problem is widely acknowledged, misconceptions about its causes and its effects on families make it difficult for banks to meet the challenge. So why do we see this disparity in banking access? Like, we see it in the paper, but why?
Should I go first?
Go ahead.
One of the recent study by FDIC, one of the biggest determinant really of disparity in banking really was the intersection between income, education, and race. So a big part of the explanation why we see this disparity in underbanking and race really has to do with that disparity in income. Just to clarify, when a study finds income and education and you correlate with race, that doesn't mean race is not. Because of structural racism, this is how we end up with such huge wealth and income disparity and educational disparity in opportunities across race. So it's really almost speaking one of the same.
Like, now that you're there, what is the answer?
I want to just add one thing because I find interesting that if you look at over time the trend in unbankedness and underbanked, it has actually decreased tremendously, especially after the pandemic. I think probably a lot of it had to do with people realizing, oh, this is where I'm getting the money, that was being injected in the economy and so forth. So it really begs the question to really understand why people are banked, why they are underbanked, and of that, what really that entails.
So, and as a follow-up, what are some ways that Black banks can be supported in addressing these challenges? Or, I'm sorry, that Black banks could address this challenge? So, like, if it is racism, what can Black banks do? We know that there are fewer of them. Is there something different than they can do than the larger banks? And just thinking about how so many of those banks are now gone, right? But where there wasn't the issue of racism there. You know, the people that worked at the bank lived in the community. They knew who was who, right? And so it's like...
I guess I can pick up, continue the conversation. It's really just reverberating what's being said. There's always been this tension between mission-driven focus of banks and having to serve lower income areas. So when the economy is experiencing problems, so these institutions are going to be the most vulnerable institution in terms of how much they can do. And at the same time, they are regulated institutions. Especially, we have to think about perhaps the discussion we're having now in the context of quite a lot of things happening now. This very moment, some bank closure, etc. For MDI in particular, you always have this market question in terms of what they're serving, but also a size question related with having smaller assets. the disproportionately higher cost of a bank that's smaller relative to the larger bank. So these are like some of the major sort of issues that affect these MDIs.
So I guess understanding these challenges, what can be done to address them?
Does anyone else want to add something? Yeah, I mean, I do want to emphasize this idea of, I think what you really is the idea of community of capitalism.
Yeah.
Because when we look at Asian banks, right, they have commercial interests, trading relation with Asia, and compared to black banks. So that's kind of one of the big, I believe, perhaps difference between those Asian banks and black banks. So we want to think about how does the community of raising goes around ensuring capital raising for black banks. And I also think actually the CDFI fund, because almost all the black banks are CDFIs. And I think every year CDFI gets this form of support from Treasury. And of course, I think you briefly mentioned ESIM, but then $9 billion that was allocated as of March 21, 2022 was directed to, among other bank, MPI, CTFI specifically. It was more like for emergency, COVID-19 related problems that the depositors would be facing. But I think these are like unprecedented level of support to MDI that are not available, and we don't know yet where that's going in terms of how much. We haven't seen studies yet to say how that translates to lending and things like that. But I think we are living in a world where we have unprecedented flow of capitalization to MDI.
It's like I want us to talk about the challenges, but also talk about solutions. So a report from the St. Louis Fed suggested that the police killings of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor reinvigorated demands for racial economic equity, including calls to bank black, right? And so
I can try to list a few things without going into detail. I think you mentioned the CTFI fund, the fact that a lot of black banks are CTFI, and we mentioned the latest unprecedented big injection of money that we expect to help. And then we can also talk about the market tax credit. This is like an area beneficial to black banks. And then I hope that I'm not cheating a little bit by going there, but because of the intrinsic connection of mission-driven communities, almost by default, the asset of the bank really goes into the community. So we really also need to think about policies for the communities that those banks are serving. Or we're talking about stable housing, population retention, business vitality. Just the bank is really part of the ecosystem of the community. So I know we're speaking specifically about banks, but the bank is probably as thriving as the community serving. We also want to think about this thing from a holistic manner also when it comes to banking.
So we've spent some time discussing black and other minority-owned banks, and so now I'd like for us to think about how these challenges impact minority-owned firms. So despite leading a significant portion of the nation's businesses, minority-owned firms are still having a much harder time accessing small business loans than their white counterparts. So what are some of the direction with that? But that kind of is what comes to mind for me.
Yeah, I mean, I could add a little bit to that. First of all, I think what we need to understand, keeping in mind everything you said, but at the end of the day, even when you control for size of business, characteristics of owners, industries, there is a gap in bank credit that is left unexplained. A study that I just, that I'm working on, I mean, the data is just, I collected the data, so I'm not claiming anything major, but what I got to do was design the survey where I asked a tons of questions to try to get at people's preferences and perceived institutional constraints that they have. And even in my meager data, when I was looking at Detroit, which is a market that you really have all sizes of Black business, they found that institutional constraint really could explain differences you see in Blacks. And institutional constraint meaning discouragement from even asking, going to the bank and asking, and lack of previous relationship banking carrying over needs for financial access and not getting it at the moment. And then also I think there is a mismatch between the type of products that minority businesses and small businesses in general, and since minority businesses are disproportionately small businesses, their experience in terms of the type of loans they need. Like large banks are really not lending small business loans. Like the average loan for large bank is about 600,000, and the small business is sort of asking between 20 and 50,000. And where you see this market is in the SBA, it's in the credit union, it's in even fintech now, in all those type of institutions. We sort of shift the conversation a little bit to try to know now, how do we get small business loans to minority businesses?
So a study released earlier this year by our colleague Maud and I, Chicago Fed economists Jung Se Kong and Alexander Sintefis, an assistant professor of finance at Yale, found that in big cities, Black households had a slightly higher demand for banks than white households did. But this higher demand was more than offset by weaker bank access, leading Black communities in big cities to use branches less. So what policies can be put in place to close the access gap? And I guess looking at the study, it was like they went back and forth between, are banks not locating in Black neighborhoods because Black people are less likely to use them, or because they deposit less, and that, in some cases that was used as an excuse, or why is it that Black people aren't using these banks as much, right? And then what can be done is the question.
I meant to look at the study, but I assume it's like an econometric guy. I didn't know how much it is cost of the policy. But I do know that one of the contributions of his work, at least econometrically, was to try to come up with a measure of access that including the idea of quality of access. So it wasn't just like the literature has measurement of access related to distance to branches. He tried to bring other factors that would be indicative somehow of quality, in the sense that the quality of service matters also. I don't know what type of policy that will involve cultural sensitivity and things like that, because that's really an aspect of banking that has always been important. You go to a bank branch and then you kind of not welcome and so forth and things like that. I think based on what he was talking about quality of access, I think that was a connotation of his work.
I was just sitting here thinking, a lot of it has to do with transparency as well. Just basically when you're dealing with a bank, the more they're transparent on fees.
Columns that we need to properly assess the potential discrimination. So when we try
just add to, I think CRA needs more teeth, right? So that the regulations need to be tighter about what counts as, CRA credit.
Forecasting this year's macro environment, what are some specific challenges and opportunities that Black consumers face, and what can Black and other minority-owned banks do to mitigate these challenges and take advantage of opportunities?
I will say this, I think there's a need to make sure that we look at and address purpose.
I would add to that, it's a little bit difficult because things are changing right now as far as the bank sector is about minority bank, really part of the whole banking system. It's not like we saying there is something particular about us, supervised institution. I mean, we do know after the financial crisis that there were reforms made, ensure better safeguard for banks in general. We do know at the same time, I think maybe this week or something, we've had the new bank term lending program to bolster abilities of the bank to safeguard depositors' deposit. So we know, there's different interest rate now going on in the economy. So we really a little bit on a sort of cusp of changes. We cannot really tell what's going on in a way. So there is this sort of issues happening, sort of lurking around this discussion we have.
Okay, there we are, all of you. Okay.
Gonna get to you. I'm gonna move.
So the day continues, and I am on my way to the presidential keynote address.
I'm saying that everything isn't a single bullet, but if workers face higher unemployment rates, if we're going to make sure and run the economy with price stability, you end up making a situation in which workers' ability to go to their bosses and say, we're more productive. Where's our cut of the higher productivity? This is what unions do.
Cheers! 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 Je suis en train de faire un petit vlog. Une journée de la vie d'une économiste.
Est-ce que je peux être sur le vlog?
J'aimerais bien. Je ne sais même pas.
Experts on banking, on trade supply, on minority depository institutions. I'm so honored to finally meet the author of these papers.
Oh my God, le plaisir est partagé.
Est-ce qu'on a le droit au français sur le blog?
Oui, bien sûr, pourquoi pas. So we are doing a reception, and I am here with my colleague, who is one of the panelists that you've seen some images of him earlier. So very nice.
Very nice to meet you.
Heading to dinner with my colleagues.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And I was like, wow, this is so cool. I mean, it's
Okay.
very rare to read like inspiring work in economics, right? So I was like, oh, this is so great. And then there was that MBER race.
Say that's, going to help. I mean, given we structure entire societies specifically around the social definition of gender, how do you get
All right? And are you ready for some opposition?
Hey everybody. Yes, everything's fine. I don't know, cheers! We should do a cheers for all that.
We want to, every time we go to a city like this,
So here we are, hours later after a wonderful dinner. I'm waiting for my Uber to get home. I'm finally home. Whew. That was a long one. But a very fun one, actually. Very fun one. So this was just a glimpse of one of those days where the idea is you do the research and you spread the information and lend your expertise to the extent that you can. What can I say? And so I hope you enjoyed spending the day with me, and this is just a glimpse of one of the things that I do, and I thought that some people might be curious or interested in sort of seeing a little bit of that experience. So just sharing, what can I say, and hopefully that's useful information for some. Until next time, thanks for visiting me. Have a good thing. Bye.